With football season upon us now, there's a lot happening in the news, so be sure to subscribe to my other channel, JG9 News, where I give you up-to-the-minute updates on everything happening in the NFL in a completely relaxed, unscripted format, and I give my thoughts on everything taking place around the National Football League today. And now, on with our feature presentation. Yes, you clicked on the right video and channel. Yes, this video has 100% to do with sports and football. Do not worry, I'm not going political. I'm not making a statement of any kind. You're going to see exactly what I mean by the end of the video. It's all going to make sense, but trust me, this video has 100% to do with football. Believe me on this one. With that being said, let's get on with it. If you saw night one of the Democratic National Convention last night, you probably noticed this man right here, head coach Steve Kerr, deliver a message to the Chicago crowd endorsing current Vice President Kamala Harris, as she will accept the Democratic nomination later in the week for President of the United States. Oddly enough, and I kid you not, the speech by Kerr had football talk in it, as Kerr broke down what Vice Presidential nominee Tim Walz should have done as a high school defensive coordinator in Minnesota.
I have to say, Coach Walz, way too much reliance on the blitz in '99 against Mankato East. You had a strong defensive line. I would have played more press coverage with your corners and then dropped the safeties into a Tampa 2. That's just me.
Somewhere in the great beyond, Buddy Ryan is furious at the idea of playing a Tampa 2 and not blitzing, but I digress. Anyways, and this is a completely hypothetical situation, I want you to imagine that the Republican nominee on the other side, Donald Trump, was absolutely livid about the fact that Steve Kerr delivered a speech at the DNC, and in a tirade, he blasted the man and said that he didn't know what he was talking about. And then, Trump says in this hypothetical scenario, Steve Kerr is an absolute loser of a head coach who has never won anything in his life. There's no way Doc Rivers makes a statement like that, because Rivers is a winner. Regardless of your thoughts on Kerr and his ideologies and whatnot, and whether you think he's overrated as a coach, that statement is just, well, it's objectively false. The man's won 4 NBA titles with the Golden State Warriors. The man was the head coach just a few weeks ago in Paris at the Olympics as he helped the United States win the gold medal. Making a statement like that just makes it seem like you have no idea what you're talking about, that you know nothing about sports, and it gives you the worst comeback imaginable. A statement like that is absolutely ridiculous in more ways than one, and is quite simply factually incorrect. It makes it seem like you don't know your history. Speaking of history though, if you like your NFL history and you like learning more about history, then this is the place for you, because we talk about all things NFL history all the time on this channel with a new video every single day. So if you like that sort of stuff, then be sure to hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel. Thanks in advance for your support as we try and grow this community and get to 70,000 subscribers. Well, I bring that up because something like this happened in 1984 with the San Francisco 49ers in the NFL during the presidential election. See, I told you this was going to be a football video. I just had to set the scene and get you hooked in. If you know your history, the 1984 election was about as big of a landslide as the Jaguars-Dolphins divisional round game in 1999, or Super Bowl 24, or any other massive blowout that comes to your head. Because in 1984, Republican Ronald Reagan, in his bid for re-election as the 40th President of the United States, handily defeated Democrat Walter Mondale. And while the moment we're going to talk about today definitely did not hand Reagan the election, because trust me, there were about 10,000 other things that you think of before this, it definitely did not help Mondale's cause. I'll put it that way. Because in 1984, Walter Mondale and his campaign had some, shall we say, interesting things to say about one of the teams in the NFL that made no sense whatsoever, that deserves a deep dive 4 decades later in light of everything taking place today. Because this is the story behind the San Francisco 49ers, the 1984 election, and the bizarre jab heard around the world. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, and just how insane and how absurd it was, we need some context to understand how good this team right here, the San Francisco 49ers, was, and how everything was going for them in 1984. The 49ers entered the 1984 season as one of the favorites to win the Super Bowl, boasting the 5th best odds of any team in the league following a 1983 season where they rebounded to get to 10-6 and where they advanced to the NFC Championship before a highly controversial 3-point loss, one step shy of Super Bowl 18. And safe to say, in 1984, the 49ers were doing more than just picking up right where they left off. They were decimating teams, and they were destroying teams, and they were looking like the best team in football. By the time the incident in our story happened, we were 9 weeks into the year, and the 49ers were sitting pretty with an 8-1 record, with the lone blemish being a shocking loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Other than that, they were perfect, and they were dominant, including in their most recent game, a 33-0 shutout victory against the Los Angeles Rams, where they forced 5 turnovers. However you want to look at it, and whichever metric you want to use, the 49ers were superb. 9 weeks into the season, and they had the best record in the NFC. They had a 3-game lead on second place in the NFC West, so they basically had the division on lockdown, barring one of the worst collapses of all time, and they even so much as had a 2-game lead on everyone else in the conference for home field advantage and for the number 1 seed. 9 weeks in, and the 49ers had scored 247 points, or well over 27 points per game. This was the 3rd best total in the NFL, only behind the St. Louis Cardinals and, of course, Dan Marino's Miami Dolphins. 9 weeks in, and the 49ers had only allowed 143 points. This was the 3rd best total in the NFL, only behind the Miami Dolphins and the Denver Broncos, so they had the best defense in the NFC. And with their point differential of plus 104, the 49ers towered above the rest of the NFC, and they only trailed the Miami Dolphins in that category. In fact, the 49ers were in, quite clearly, a very different stratosphere than any other team in the conference. Here's a look at every team in the NFC and their point differential through the first 9 weeks of the year. See that bar at the very end that is significantly higher than everything else, looking like a New York City skyscraper compared to the average building in a one-stoplight town in Texas? Yeah, that's the 49ers. They were that good. For some perspective, the next best team in the NFC had 6 wins by this point. The 49ers had 6 wins by multiple possessions by this point. And when you've got a great head coach in charge like Bill Walsh, who you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner, and you've got a slew of Pro Bowlers, with 10 players on San Francisco getting those honors by the end of the season, including future Hall of Fame guys like Ronnie Lott and Joe Montana, and some other exceptional players like Randy Cross and Dwight Hicks, it's no surprise why the 49ers were a dominant team. And I forgot to mention during all of this that the 49ers were off to this great start without arguably their best defensive player, defensive end Fred Dean. In 1981, the 49ers acquired Fred Dean from the San Diego Chargers in a trade, and he was a big part in why San Francisco won the Super Bowl that year. And by this point, in 1983, he had 17.5 sacks and was one of the best defensive ends in football. In 1984, he was holding out for the first half of the year due to a contract dispute, and I talked about that in a previous video of mine, so you can learn more about that by clicking the card in the upper right corner. But by this point, it seemed like the dispute was winding down, and he was going to come back to the 49ers. So keep all of that in mind. The 49ers were already this good, and then we're getting a guy back who had 17.5 sacks the year before. He was going to come back for the second half of the year and the playoff push. Just dominant team in so many ways. However, even though the football world was focused on the 49ers in 1984 and just how good they were, by this point in the calendar and by this point in the year, most of America was concerned with something else entirely. That's right, the 1984 election. On November 6th, the country was going to come together with roughly 92 million Americans deciding who they wanted the President of the United States to be, and whether they wanted Republican nominee and incumbent Ronald Reagan to serve another 4 years in office, or whether they wanted to change and wanted Democratic nominee and former Vice President Walter Mondale to serve. Oddly enough, This is not even the first time I've talked about the 1984 election on this channel as it pertains to the NFL. As if you want to learn more about a bizarre broadcasting controversy regarding one of the debates and how it interfered with a Monday Night Football game, click the card in the upper right corner. But as seems to be the case every 4 years, everyone's got an opinion on the election and who they want to win and who they think is best fit to serve the country. And unsurprisingly, that included this team right here, the San Francisco 49ers. Because some people wanted to know, who are you voting for in the election? And on Thursday, November 1st, a local sports writer got into the 49ers locker room and went around asking the players who they were voting for on Tuesday, and whether they were voting for Reagan or for Mondale. Now you're probably wondering, why the heck did no one put a stop to this? Why the heck did head coach Bill Walsh allow for his team to participate in such a poll? Well, Walsh was in his office, so he had no idea that this was even occurring. However, the moment he found out what the writer was doing, not wanting any distractions and any divisiveness or anything along those lines, he put a stop to it and kicked the reporter out. So you can't blame Bill Walsh for this one. Not all the players participated in the poll. Some of them never got the chance to get asked the question because Walsh put a stop to it. And some of them refused to answer the question because they either didn't want to get involved, they didn't know how their words would be construed, or they thought that the public would take this straw poll seriously. However, when all was said and done, 29 players participated in the poll, and the results were absolutely overwhelming, as by a score of 23-5-1, Ronald Reagan was the winner in the locker room. The 49ers were rooting for Morning in America. They were rooting for the Gipper. They wanted Reagan to win a second term. Now, I have no clue who the one was for. Maybe it was for a third-party candidate, or maybe it was just a Rob Lowe type figure who was just rooting for everyone. But regardless, Mondale got blown out in this poll by the 49ers. They, like much of the country, were going for Ronald Reagan. Now look, there are tons of polls that come out, all with different methods of polling, and all with different biases and flaws. You have to remember that in general when it comes to polling. It all depends on who you poll. Just because you get an overwhelming result in a poll doesn't mean anything about the larger population. As an example, if I ask a bunch of people in Jacksonville outside of Everbank Stadium who their favorite team is, odds are the Jaguars will be the winner. That doesn't mean that the Jaguars are the most popular team in the NFL. If I phone a bunch of people on a house phone at 11 a.m. and ask them who they're voting for in the election, and most of them name the same candidate, that doesn't mean that candidate is going to win. Because think of the kind of person who has a house phone, is inclined to answer the phone from an unknown number, and is in their home at 11 a.m. in the first place. You get the idea. There's a million different polls and tons of polling methods. And even though the odds were looking incredibly good for Ronald Reagan entering the election, and even though the 49ers were leaning toward Reagan, this by itself didn't tell us anything. So Walter Mondale's campaign had a few options at their disposal. They could have done the smart thing, which was to, ignore the results of the poll and just not comment on it. Or if you are going to comment on it, do something tongue-in-cheek and do something that relates to football. Something like saying, that's why they play the game on the field. Or any given Sunday. Or I guess Tuesday in this case. And if that's what happened here, then this is a complete non-story, and I'm not making this video. Breaking news! A group of people wanted Ronald Reagan to win in 1984. That was like the vast majority of the country. Finding someone who was voting for Reagan in 1984 was like finding a Starbucks in Seattle. It's not hard, and by itself, it's not newsworthy. However, Mondale and his campaign, for some reason, just days before the election, decided to respond to this poll. This was not a national poll with a reputable source or a huge polling base. May I remind you, this was a poll conducted in a locker room by a sports writer where 29 people voted, all of whom were football players, and where peer pressure definitely could have been involved. Because if you hear everyone in the lockers next to you voting for Reagan, even if you are voting for Mondale, you don't want to say Mondale. So you just say Reagan, so you don't get in a conversation or poke the bear or anything like that. Because according to one of Mondale's campaign managers, Bob Morales, he said that the poll results weren't surprising because the voters were overpaid athletes. All right, not off to a good start. Maybe not the smartest response in the world, but considering that animosity toward the players was still pretty high after the strike in 1982, where the players struck for 2 months and got nothing, I at least get it. And if that was it, then, once again, I would not be making this video. But then, just like the Energizer Bunny, Bob Morales decided to keep going. And, oh man, what he said next left everyone scratching their heads. Because as Morales said, I doubt if you poll the Los Angeles Raiders that you'd get the same result. They're winners. Seriously, Morales said that if you poll the Raiders instead of the 49ers, the results would be different because the Raiders were winners, thereby implying that the 49ers were losers. I'm sorry, what? Did you seriously just say that? Did those words seriously come out of your mouth? Are you drunk? Are you high? Are you stupid? How could you possibly say that? All right, first off, before I get to the obvious of why this makes no sense, let's start with the hypocrisy of it all. You can't trust the poll results because of course 49er players are going to be voting for a Republican because they were all rich, even though NFL salaries were nowhere close in 1984 to what they are today. However, if you poll the Raiders, the results would be different and the poll would actually mean something, even though Raider players are paid the same because they're in the same league and they have the same profession. Because that makes sense. That makes a ton of sense. How can you discredit the results of this poll because of the salaries the 49ers players are making, but then say that if you interviewed a different team making the same salary, that the results would be different and the poll would be better? How does that make sense? That's like a school district having two high schools, North and South. And I say that I hate high school North because 80% of the teachers graduated from a snobby, rich Ivy League school. But I like high school South, even though in that school, 80% of the teachers there graduated from an Ivy League school. Like, you get the contradiction, right? You see where your logic falls apart, right? This is such an insane logical argument that I don't know why you would utter those words, Bob Morales. I just don't. I just don't know what the Mondale campaign was thinking here. But the big one, and the crux of this video, did you seriously just call the 49ers losers? Did you seriously just say that the results would be different if you poll the Raiders because the Raiders were winners and the 49ers were losers? Of all the football analogies and comparisons to make, that was the one you came up with? Do you have eyes? Do you even watch the sport? Why in the world would you think it's a good idea to call the freaking San Francisco 49ers a bunch of losers? Yes, the Raiders were a good team. They were 7-2 by this point in 1984. You know who was a better team? The freaking San Francisco 49ers! Yes, the Raiders won the Super Bowl last year. You know who else won a Super Bowl just 3 seasons before, with a lot of those guys on that team being on the 1984 team? The freaking San Francisco 49ers! In the 3 seasons of the Ronald Reagan presidency, from 1981 to 83 at the time, the Raiders won 4 playoff games. You want to know who won as many playoff games during Reagan's presidency also, at 4? The freaking San Francisco 49ers! This is like if you said that the Kansas City Chiefs were a bad football team. This is like if you said that Travis Kelce had no idea what it's like to be a champion. If Mondale and his campaign used this line on a team like the Houston Oilers, or the Indianapolis Colts, or the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, fine, go for it. But you just seriously said that the best team in football was a bunch of losers. The team that is curb-stomping everyone and could potentially go down as one of the greatest teams of all time has no idea what winning is about, even though the players on that team had literally won a title not that long ago. Am I expecting you, in the middle of an election where you're trying to raise funds and coordinate everything and set up speeches and rallies across the country and across the state of California, to be following the NFL super closely? Of course not. You've got bigger fish to fry. But all you had to do was literally pick up a newspaper, check the standings, and then not open your mouth and say those words. That's all you had to do. Because saying that the 49ers were a bad football team and losers when they were 8-1, when they were blowing out their competition, when they had a better record than the team you compared them to, and when they were on cruise control and were a lock to get the number 1 seed, makes you look like a total moron and an incompetent fool. And good job by Walter Mondale's campaign calling this team behind me right here, the San Francisco 49ers, a bunch of losers who had no idea what it took to win. Really good job. You really thought that one through, guys. San Francisco did not lose another game for the rest of the season, as they finished the year with a 15-1 record, getting the number 1 seed in the NFC and finishing with the best record in the NFL. They made the playoffs, they dominated all of their opponents, winning all their games by double digits, and they defeated the Miami Dolphins at Super Bowl 19 by a final score of 38-16, in a game that took place, oddly enough, on the same day that Ronald Reagan was inaugurated for his second term as President of the United States. When all was said and done, the 49ers finished the year with an 18-1 record if you count the regular season and the postseason games combined. They ended the year as one of the greatest teams to ever play the sport, and 40 years later, they're still remembered as one of the greatest teams of all time. How good was San Francisco in 1984? They lost the same number of games as the number of states that Walter Mondale won at the election. 1. Obviously, am I saying that Walter Mondale lost the election because of these comments made about the 49ers? Absolutely not. The election was decided well before then, and I don't think there was a single person who was voting for Mondale and switched to Reagan because of these remarks. Having said that, it doesn't make it any less stupid to say something along these lines. The 1984 San Francisco 49ers were, quite literally, the furthest thing from losers. Saying that the results of a random straw poll are invalid because the people involved don't know what it's like to win, when said team is the winningest team in their conference and is one of the best teams to ever play the sport, and when said team won a Super Bowl not too long ago, is an argument that one should probably not make if they want to be taken seriously. Because if ever there was a time for this old proverb, it was right here when it came to trying to talk about the NFL and the 49ers during an election. 'Tis better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.